Richard Branson was coming onto our podcast. When I was 16, I created a music newsletter with my best friend Megan called Backstage Beats. We would email people monthly with the latest music gossip and concert reviews. I say newsletter because websites barely existed back then, and certainly not at the level I would know how to create one myself. We would write to record companies and ask for interviews with bands when they were in town. No joke, I got at least 20 free CDs and backstage passes to a few concerts. We even interviewed the guys from Stroke 9. If you haven't heard of them, I totally understand. They were pretty small, but we loved them. Thinking back on it, how hilarious is it to think of two 16-year-old girls, okay, fans, wandering backstage and interviewing band members? I'm laughing just thinking about it. Why am I sharing this story, and what does it have to do with Richard Branson? It's actually something that him and I have in common. He started a music magazine at 16 called Student Magazine. Granted, he started a few decades before me. It was a magazine versus a newsletter. And oh yeah, Richard Branson is now a billionaire with hundreds of businesses under his belt, unlike me. So the comparison stops at our shared love of music at 16, but nevertheless, when I heard he was going to be on the podcast that I produced, Virgin Active Minds, I couldn't stop smiling. Not only was I excited about our shared love of music, but also because our host, Mark Sito, was about to host an extremely high-profile guest on the show. And the reason a high-profile guest like Richard Branson is so ridiculously valuable for a podcast is because of these reasons. One, their prominence and influence can attract a larger audience, which increases the podcast's visibility and credibility. Including a high-profile name like Richard Branson in your episode title increases search volume and the likelihood that your podcast will pop up in the search bar. Two, listeners are often drawn to well-known guests, eager to gain insights and perspectives from individuals who have achieved success or recognition in their respective fields. Three, it opens up opportunities for collaborations and sponsorships. Four, these high-profile guests might actually promote the episode on their big platforms, driving a new audience to your podcast. And five, a high-profile guest looks really good for you too, heightening your credibility and authority in your shared topic of interest. But how do you get high-profile guests? The task feels daunting, almost impossible. Am I right? Wrong. Let's chat about 5 strategic ways that you, yes, you, can get high-profile guests onto your podcast. Thank you for joining me today. I'm Jamie Kennedy, executive podcast producer at Brave Moon Podcasts. We've produced podcasts for Virgin Active Health Clubs, Functional Training Institute, well-being coaches and speakers, and many more. I'm including all of the insider secrets I've learned along the way being a podcast producer for some of the top health and fitness brands on the charts today. So whether you're a small business owner, health and fitness professional, or a wellness enthusiast looking to boost your brand through podcasting, this podcast is for you. For a comprehensive list of the equipment and software my clients use, head to my website and grab my free Start a Podcast guide. I've condensed months of research into this guide, offering you the industry's best choices. Download it today. The link is in the show notes. Let's start with, how the heck did we get Richard Branson? Well, you might have guessed it already, but Virgin Active Minds is, of course, Virgin Active's podcast. And guess who sits at the top of the pyramid for Virgin Active? You guessed it, Richard Branson. This was the truest form of necrophilia. That said, the fact that the man himself took the time to sit down with our host was due to the hard work and talent of the people behind the scenes who made the podcast as good as it was, so that we got the attention of Richard Branson. So let's level the playing field. The question you want answered is, how do you get Richard Branson on your podcast? Let's cut the crap. Richard would be a hard one. Not because your podcast isn't highly valuable and deserves high-profile guests, but let's face it, Richard is about the busiest human I know. With hundreds of active businesses, which he's constantly traveling and promoting, and when he's not doing that, apparently he's kite surfing off Necker Island, living the dream. But there are a lot of high-profile guests out there who have very powerful platforms and strategic audiences who would absolutely say yes to coming onto your podcast. Gone are the days when celebrities and high profilers were 6 degrees of separation from each of us. Do you remember the game 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon? It was a game that was inspired by the idea that Kevin Bacon, an actor, if you haven't heard of him, could be linked to any other actor in Hollywood through a chain of no more than 6 acquaintances. The game is actually based on the concept of 6 degrees of separation, which suggests that everyone in the world can be connected to any other person with no more than 6 links. But social media has changed the game. The ease of finding and connecting with people on social media has, in a sense, compressed the degrees of separation. In a world where individuals can network, communicate, and establish connections with others across the globe almost instantly, the idea of being only a few links away from any other person becomes even more plausible. Just look at LinkedIn. You can tell the exact degrees of separation you have to anyone just by searching for them. Claim to fame? I'm only 1 degree of separation away from Obama. That's right. And I'm taking it to the bank. Just kidding. You're probably just 1 degree away from him as well. Just saying. Because of this, I want you to really rethink your thought process of what you think is achievable. The most high-profile people you know in the world got to where they are by networking with the right people and confidence. And you can too. As you start to bring on more and more high-profile guests, your network will grow like crazy. A great example of this is my podcast client, Meg Durham, who scored a book publishing deal through her podcast interview network. So let's define what a high-profile guest is. Because you might be wondering, how do you even find the right high-profile guest for your podcast? In the realm of health and fitness, a high-profile guest will be someone who has made significant contributions to the industry, achieved notable success, or possesses a unique perspective that aligns with your podcast's niche or concept. High-profile guests could be renowned nutritionists, fitness experts, professional athletes, or influential figures in wellness. One thing you never want to do is put a number limit on how many followers or subscribers they have. There are micro-influencers out there who have way more sway with their audience of 1,000 than influencers with 50,000 followers or more. So instead of looking at numbers, it's important to qualify them by using qualitative characteristics. For example, have they written a best-selling book about a topic related to your podcast niche, and does the message resonate with you? Or do they have a podcast with a ton of 5-star reviews? Or do they have 1,000 followers on Instagram, but 100+ likes or comments on each post? Finding high-profile guests with these qualities will give your podcast the boost you're looking for. Now, in episode 7 of my podcast, I talked a lot about how to find better guests for your podcast. I also talked about ways to approach guests. Looking for a direct link to episode 7? DM me on Instagram at AboutJamie, and I'll send you an automated link to the episode in Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Your choice. Now, in episode 20, I'm going to talk about how to take it a step further to not only get awesome guests, but to get the big timers too. And since I've talked a considerable amount already, I'm turning these 5 useful strategies into 5 hacks time. Hack number 1. Before you reach out to high-profile guests, focus on elevating your podcast's credibility. High-profile guests are more likely to consider an invitation from a podcast that reflects a commitment to quality content and production. You'd be shocked at how far a well-put-together podcast thumbnail, title, and description can take you. In addition, at the very minimum, you should have a podcast landing page on the web. This is a destination web page that is dedicated to your podcast. Whether it's on your existing website or you start a new one, that's fine. Just make sure that it's live, polished, and offers a good understanding of what your podcast is about. Hack number 2, create a media kit to present to potential guests. A media kit can actually work on many fronts because it's a prominent tool that provides essential information about your podcast to not only potential guests, but also sponsors and the media as well. It typically includes details about your podcast, your audience, your demographics, past achievements, and episodes of note, as well as ways in which potential guests can engage with your show. If you're unsure how to create a media kit, jump into Canva, which offers a wide variety of media kit templates. And if you get lost, DM me and let's chat. Hack number 3. Showcase your previous high-profile guests in your media kit as well as your podcast landing page. Highlight these episodes by offering direct links to the episodes. It serves as social proof and demonstrates that other respected professionals have found value in being on your show. Haven't had a high-profile guest yet? Don't worry. Highlight any guest you've had on your show. It's unlikely the PR person or high-profile guest researching your podcast will dive deeper into the high-profile guest episodes you featured. More than likely, they'll accept whoever you feature as a high-profile guest and move on. That said, the second you get your first high-profile guest, be sure to add them, and quickly. Hack number 4. When reaching out to big-timer guests, emphasize the mutual benefits of the collaboration. Explain how their presence on your podcast can provide exposure to a specific engaged audience that aligns with their target demographic. Highlight the value you bring to the table and how the collaboration can be a win-win for both parties. It may feel a little bit like you're faking it till you're making it. Don't worry, we all are to some extent. Remember that even Barack Obama feels intimidated by someone else's status. We all, at times, experience imposter syndrome. The key is to move past it and trust that you have something amazing to offer the world. Your podcast, for example. Hack number 5. Landing big-timer guests often requires persistence and patience. Understand that these individuals have busy schedules and may receive numerous interview requests. Follow up respectfully and express genuine interest in having them on your podcast. I repeat, always follow up. Sometimes it's the persistent podcaster who catches the attention of the big timer. It took Meg Durham almost a year to get the holistic psychologist onto her podcast. Now she's interviewed her twice. Absolutely worth it. Thank you again so much for joining me on your podcasting journey. Don't forget to subscribe, and if you enjoyed this episode, please leave a 5-star review. It helps people like you find this podcast as well. Until the next episode, keep those conversations flowing and keep being the amazing powerhouse that you are. And as always, remember that consistency, authenticity, and promoting your podcast are key to your success. Happy podcasting.